Starting at a certain point in time, Elizabeth kept having the same dream. A dream where a man appeared and showed her a book called The History of Velfera. It was the story of the crown prince of the Empire of Alpenia, Enoch Silas, who saved an entire continent by destroying a ferocious dragon with his companions and his subsequent life. The protagonist had the same name as Elizabeth. The man in the dream replied that it was right, for the protagonist was Elizabeth. He was telling the girl that she was the protagonist of this book. The man said that this Elizabeth from the book was a brilliant mage of this world, a warrior and the love of the crown prince of the Enoch Empire. The girl's name was Elizabeth Lily, and her reality was very different from the reality in the book. The girl was an imprisoned slave kidnapped by those who worship the devil. She could have been a sacrifice for the devil lord. She was forced to call upon the devil and was threatened with death. The little girl didn't want to suffer anymore. She was very tired of it. Elizabeth thought it would be better if she died right now. But a man's voice in her dream told her not to worry and promised her that the man would soon come to save her. The man who was supposed to save the girl was Echelot Vane. He was like a mage and fellow Enoch, the protagonist of Velfera's story. He was both her benefactor and her enemy. He fed her, put her to bed, gave her clothes. It seemed to the girl that Echelot was too kind to her. As expected, following Echelot was a good chance to get to know Asherot. The girl was taken to the ship. This could mean the beginning of a new story. There was some dark figure that out of the darkness grabbed the girl's hand and asked if she was sure she was the heroine of the book, if she was really inside the novella. The voice was asking what the girl would do if it all turned out to be an illusion. It was driving Elizabeth crazy. She realized that it wasn't like that. Would she, who wanders in darkness like a captured slave, be able to overcome the many adversities and become the great magician Elizabeth Lily? The man in the dream asked if the girl liked the story. He said that he had written this book especially for her. Elizabeth said that the main character was her favorite. The stranger in the dream liked her best too. The hero was able to destroy the fierce dragon and save the continent because the heroine was with him. A brilliant mage of this century and the beloved of Enoch, the crown prince of the empire, the one who would become the future empress of this land. Her name was Elizabeth Lily. Little Elizabeth woke up and realized that she had seen the dream again, and the person in the dream told her that she was the protagonist. The girl didn't realize if that was really true because she was in a confined prison. The girl was born in a small but peaceful village. But one day, devil-worshipping heretics appeared and killed everyone in the village. They killed everyone, forced them to obey and become a sacrifice for the devil. Spirits appeared. There was no mercy. They killed everyone. One of the heretics found a sacred stone. He realized they could sell it for a high price. He didn't realize where these spirits really came from, who didn't even touch Elizabeth. The Satanists, who had discovered her gift for summoning evil spirits, had dragged the girl into their fortress. Through the bars in the window, the girl could see the full moon and realized that they would definitely make her summon spirits tonight, on the full moon. Elizabeth was very scared. She wanted to run away. Her hands were trembling. She thought if she was really the heroine of the book, then one day the main character's comrades would come to rescue her. But it was just a story from a book. The door opened and one of the Satanists walked in. He said it was a full moon and asked the slave girl to come out. He dragged the girl by the hand and she prayed for salvation and screamed that she wanted to go home. The Satanist said she was too noisy and tossed the girl aside. Elizabeth fell and saw someone's bloody hand next to her. She turned her head and saw a dead man lying down and heretics standing around. The Satanists were saying that they had already made enough sacrifices, and if Elizabeth didn't want to finish as well, then let her call on the evil spirits right now. They had done this to a large number of people, no matter children or adults. With each full moon, the number of corpses only increased. It was unclear how many more people had to die, and until when Elizabeth had to suffer, she was very tired. The girl closed her eyes and thought about the fact that she wanted to die so that she wouldn't suffer anymore. She remembered the voice from the dream that told her not to worry and said that she should wait a little before meeting the main character and promised that this man would soon come to save her. The Satanists heard some noise, thought it was an ambush and rushed into battle. They believed that the Overlord had granted them divine protection. The man in the dream always told Elizabeth that when she met this man, she would recognize him immediately. Elizabeth saw that some man had come. She hoped for salvation. In the sacrifice hall, the ceiling suddenly lit up, a beautiful purple light. The girl believed that she had come to be saved. After killing all the Satanists, an incredibly handsome guy approached the little girl. Elizabeth looked at him and realized it was so beautiful, like a galaxy she had seen in the past. She tried to remember if this was how it was described in the book. Before, she had only seen this kind of light in evil monsters, but they weren't as beautiful as he was. The guy said it was all true, and Elizabeth remembered that the lines in the book were the same, that the main character had said the same thing with a look on her face. She realized that this was indeed the man from the novella. Echelot Vane, bred by the Axiom School, a 7th-generation mage, the strongest mage of the 12th grade. He is referred to as the Axiom School's destructive weapon and punisher. As one of the comrades and mages of Enoch, the main character of the story of Velfera, he was a heartless man. While being Elizabeth's savior, he was at the same time her enemy. When he asked her why she had come to hate her savior, the girl replied that their first meeting had been a nightmare. Elizabeth from the novella, in fear of Echelot, summoned monsters to attack him. But of course it was useless, so Echelot planned to kill Elizabeth. He wanted to kill her, not because of animosity, but because unreasonable summoning of evil spirits was considered a serious offense and required immediate execution. The girl asked herself to stop being afraid. She convinced herself that this man would not harm her. Elizabeth was still very scared. Then Echelot leaned over to her and asked if she liked sweets. The mage pulled out a bundle with beautiful, space-like blue candies that could replace magic potions. The girl thought he wanted to replenish her magical power this way and use it for something. Echelot ate one candy and held out the other to Elizabeth. She understood that he was trying to reassure her. The girl tasted the candy and realized that it was very tasty, that it was soft and sweet. It looked like he was really being kind to the little girl. The mage who came to help asked if she could speak the official language and asked her name. Following the original, she would only tell him her first name, as Lily's last name was bestowed upon her by Enoch. Elizabeth thought it should be all right if she gave her last name ahead of time, so she called herself Echelot. He asked if she was of noble blood since she had a last name. The girl said no. The little girl was very scared and trembling. The magician asked her to explain how she ended up in such a horrible place. Elizabeth said that she was almost sacrificed, but because the evil spirits obeyed her, she was thrown here. Echelot looked at the girl in surprise when he heard about the summoning of the spirits. Elizabeth reassured herself mentally that everything was fine, and even if summoning spirits was a serious crime, it wouldn't kill her because she was a mage, the Eye of Truth. She revealed that she had indeed summoned them. The Eye of Truth is the essence of the sacred stone, aka the ability to understand thoughts, the root of all truth at a glance. Even the greatest mages spend decades learning this ability that can help them understand everything at a glance. Through the long history of mages spanning over 800 years, not even 10 people had appeared. That was why her specialty was so powerful and valuable. That was why they couldn't kill her, because she summoned spirits. Echelot sat down with the girl and asked how she knew it was an evil spirit. Elizabeth replied that people said it was an evil spirit. The guy hesitated and asked if the girl had any other personal items she wanted to take with her. The girl shook her head negatively. Her only desire was to escape and get away from this creepy place she had spent so much time in. Elizabeth felt the purification magic. She became clean, and to top it all off, the shackles around her neck disappeared. It was said about this man, Mage Echelot, in the book that he was obsessed with cleanliness, and apparently the girl was too dirty. Echelot took the girl in his arms, and in a second they were outside in the air. They were flying over the forest and were higher than the flying birds. Elizabeth was scared. She said she was going to throw up now. The magician explained that he was going to transport them gradually and asked her not to freak out. Echelot set the girl on the ground. She was throwing up and worried that he might get mad because she was dirty. The mage asked the girl to stretch out her arms, and her mind immediately thought of worst-case scenarios that he would cut her arms off. The girl stretched out her palms, and he conjured purified water for her to drink. Elizabeth thanked and said that this water was sweet and refreshing, and they flew on. Elizabeth opened her eyes and saw the sun shining down on her, but she didn't realize how it could be so bright in the cave. She thought she was still in that creepy place. The girl was covered by Ashalot's cloak. She looked around and realized he was nowhere to be found. She knew he couldn't have left her here. In the original story, Elizabeth had to run away, all because she had been enslaved her whole life and couldn't trust other people so easily. Despite all her attempts to escape, Ashalot still caught her, but even so, she still tried to escape at every opportunity. This was one of the biggest mistakes of her life. Elizabeth saw her savior walking with a plate in his hands. She wanted to shout his name, but realized he hadn't said his name yet, and she wasn't allowed to give away that she knew everything. The mage handed the girl a plate of food and told her to eat. He said he had bought it from a village nearby. Elizabeth took the plate and said if he was going to the village, she could go with him. Ashalot told her that the circle of her power could not withstand teleportation. The girl didn't know anything about it, but she was very interested. Elizabeth thought he was dumbfounded. She could feel his maelstrom inside him twisting. Ashalot told her that the word may not be familiar to her, but every human soul has rings called a circle of power. Ordinary people only have 12 rings, but mages can have up to 13. Ashalot pointed his finger at the girl's head and said that she barely had 2 rings left in her. A normal person would more likely die if their circle of power was so damaged, but the girl was a mage, and so she survived. The girl asked why she couldn't survive magical teleportation if her circle of power was broken. Elizabeth in the book could use magic very well despite her broken circle. Ashalot wondered if it was normal to do this outside. He snapped his fingers and conjured magic, a body with 4 limbs and 2 circles of strength, and the magic needed to teleport appeared in the air. It looked like a purple bubble. It showed what happens when someone's broken power collides with a power beyond their capabilities. The girl saw an explosion happen when body and force came in contact. Elizabeth realized that this could happen to her during teleportation. She thought she couldn't take it because she wasn't a good mage yet, and asked Ashalot if she could get better. He looked at her caringly and told her that when her body healed, the circle of power would heal too, and told her to eat more. Elizabeth was sometimes wary of Ashalot, just as Elizabeth had been in the story. But the little girl could see that he really cared for her, and now she felt a little better. The little girl realized how lucky she was that she hadn't run away from him. Ashalot carried Elizabeth in his arms. They were in a large city unfamiliar to her, and the girl observed many people around her. It had been a long time since Elizabeth had followed Ashalot, and all this time she ate, slept, and when she was sick, Ashalot treated her with healing magic. While the girl slept, they would set out again. But the last time they were in the forest was before she fell asleep, and she didn't realize how they had arrived in such a large city. The girl asked how long she had slept, and assumed that Ashalot had been walking all night. He said he hadn't walked very long, and her circle of strength seemed to have recovered a bit. Ashalot was moving around using space folding. It is a type of low-level spell. It is a technique used by moving through space in a straight line, not dividing the body, but linking 2 places. Elizabeth thought that Ashalot was having trouble talking to her. She noticed that he hadn't finished his sentence and said that if she was annoying him by asking so many questions, then she could keep quiet. Ashalot replied that it would be boring for her because it was too hard to understand most of what he was talking about. The mage asked the girl if she wanted to continue this pointless conversation any further. Elizabeth said that she really wanted to listen to everything. She realized that even if it was hard for her to understand everything he said, she needed to, because she was going to be a great mage in the future, and she needed to familiarize herself with magic as fast as she could. Ashalot told the girl that she was a strange child, and despite being so interested in magic, she didn't even ask who he was or where they were going. The girl didn't plan on asking. She already knew everything, but pretended she didn't know and asked what his name was. The mage introduced himself and said she could call him Ashalot, just by his first name, but asked her to never call him by his name if there were a lot of people around because they were in Holland, which was ruled by rotten older shoulders from Elvana, and they hated him a bit. Holland, a great country ruled by 7 immortal mages who are known as elders. Elvana, one of the 7th generation magic schools, and the main office of the wizarding group called the Control Center, is also located there. Elizabeth asked why they hated him, and Echelot replied that he had destroyed the head of the mage commander in that region. A gate suddenly appeared out of thin air. They entered it. The girl saw a power stone. She didn't think it was that big. As it turned out, they entered the Dutch branch of a magic item store. An employee of the store came out and thanked them for visiting and asked how she could help. Echelot asked if there were any hiking clothes available for the girl. The store employee told them to pass and asked them to lower the girl from her arms to the floor. Elizabeth was immediately surrounded by the store employee taking her measurements. The store girl cast magic, and Elizabeth saw racks all around her with lots of clothes hanging on them. She was terrified that she had to try it all on. Echelot asked if these things were enough and told her to hurry up and try everything on. The girl was afraid to imagine how long it would all take. Enoch, being obsessed with Elizabeth, tried to buy up everything he saw for her. Elizabeth, of course, time after time refused the gifts. When the girl read about it in the novel, she was a little envious. She dreamed of it in her heart. The store employee offered the girl a dress and said that it was the most popular hiking clothes among girls nowadays. This outfit is quite famous. She offered the little girl item after item and told her how beautiful she looked in all of them. Elizabeth was shocked to see so many clothes. The store worker said that since it all had many different spells on it, it wouldn't be hard to move around in it. Echelot asked if the girl looked at anything. Elizabeth asked if it was all too expensive. The shopkeeper said they had exceptionally fair prices, and Echelot asked not to worry about the price because he could buy the whole place. The girl looked at all those dresses and realized that they were quite pretty, but they wouldn't be suitable for travelers, and nodded her head negatively to Echelot. The store employee noted that the lady was quite demanding. The worker offered the girl a set of clothes and said that Elizabeth was very lucky, and they were the newest items from the Bakpan workshop. She said that this new cape contained protective temperature control magic, and even identity-concealing magic. Also included in the set was a cute purse to carry around. Echelot noticed that Elizabeth was looking at this set and couldn't take her eyes away. He said that this was the set they were buying and asked to see more clothes. The store employee thanked him for shopping. Elizabeth was shocked that they had bought so many clothes and thought that Echelot really enjoyed shopping. Some of the clothes needed to be worn now, and the store employee promised to help change. She invited Elizabeth behind the curtains, and the girl saw that there was a full moon outside the window. She began to shiver with fear, her memory recalling threats from Satanists who told her that if she didn't want to die, she had to summon evil spirits. The trembling girl asked Echelot if she could call upon him when she became afraid. The magician made a snap of his fingers, and the girl found herself already in the clothes she wanted to wear. He had changed her clothes with magic, and it turns out he can change clothes with magic too, the girl thought. Elizabeth saw the crest of Deverum, the school of magical engineers, one of the 7 great magical schools. The girl thought about the fact that that woman in the store looked like she knew Echelot, and she decided to ask him about it. Echelot asked her not to worry about it. He said she wouldn't tell the elders because she kept her business and wouldn't do anything that would cause her to lose profits. He said all the girl needs to do is eat well and grow. The magician offered to stay at the inn tonight. The girl gladly agreed. Sitting in the inn, Echelot spoke to someone on a mental link and asked to read his memories because it was too long to explain everything that had happened. Elizabeth was asleep. When she opened her eyes, it was dark all around. She didn't realize where she was. A voice from the darkness said that she was in a place fit for a wretched slave. The girl was horrified to think that she was back in that cave. She wanted to believe that this could not be, for she had gotten out of there and was no longer a slave, but the protagonist of Velfera's story. A voice from the darkness and asked if she really believed it. Elizabeth asked who was talking to her. The voice kept saying that it was all unimportant and scoffed that the girl seriously believed she was the main character of the book. The voice kept repeating that there was no way that some farmer's daughter could become the Grand Enchantress. Elizabeth replied that none of this was true, and that she had the Eye of Truth. In response, the girl heard that her Eye of Truth had already destroyed many people and evil spirits. Elizabeth covered her ears in horror and screamed that she was not the one who killed all those people. The voice kept asking if it was true what she thought was inside the story. It asked what she would do if it was just her crazy delusion. The girl shouted no and said that she was Elizabeth Lilly, the one who stays strong even in the face of many adversities, meets the main character Enoch, overcomes many obstacles, and then becomes the Grand Enchantress who defeats the dragon. And it's all really about her. Elizabeth opened her eyes in horror. She was in bed, but she was very scared and thought that suddenly everything around her was just her illusion, and she was still languishing inside that cave. The girl calmed herself and remembered Echelot, who saved her, but she did not know where he was and started shouting his name. The door to the bedroom opened and Echelot came in. She ran to him and hugged him tightly. The girl said that she woke up, and it was dark. He was not there. The girl was scared and cried, and said that she didn't like dark places, and she didn't like to be alone either. She asked Echelot to stay with her. Echelot said he wasn't as nice as the girl thought he was. Elizabeth said he was a good man. And in the book, he was not only a cold-blooded man, but also Enoch's only comrade who didn't expect a reward from him. When Elizabeth, with whom they didn't get along very well, got into trouble, he was the first to run to her aid and said he would help her just this once. The girl thought that she had turned off the path that the real Elizabeth was supposed to be on, and now a lot of the story would change. But Echelot, who had saved her, was still with her. She repeated to Magu that he was a really good man, and he stayed with her for the night so the girl wouldn't be afraid. In the morning, Elizabeth lay in her bed with Echelot holding her hand, saying that she had cried a lot last night, and if just one ring of strength was restored, it would be good. The little girl fell asleep again. The girl opened her eyes and heard Echelot talking to the snake, who said that he should have called her sooner, since the girl was in such a state, and if she hadn't been here, things would have been much sadder. Echelot told her to stop talking and heal the girl. Snake replied that Echelot had serious requests, and faster didn't always mean better. Snake turned his head at the girl, told her not to look at her, to save her eyes, and said that she had not fully recovered yet. The serpent promised to heal her completely. Opening her eyes, Elizabeth saw in front of her beautiful furniture, on which stood a mirror, perfumes, candles. She did not realize where she was. The girl heard a voice asking if she was awake. Elizabeth turned her head and saw a snake that said hello to her. The girl thought that she was seeing something that should be invisible. The serpent said that if she could see it, it meant she had challenging eyes and was finally lucky enough to meet a gifted child. Elizabeth didn't understand where the serpent was coming from. She was very scared. The serpent would crawl up to her hand and tell her that she was even scared cute. He would calm her down and tell her that everything would be okay. The girl told it to stay away and covered her eyes with her hands. It wasn't so scary anymore. Elizabeth lowered her hands, opened her eyes and saw a man standing in front of her. He said hello and introduced himself as Basilius, her friend. He said he was going to be her guardian and teacher. He winked at the little girl. Elizabeth was shocked that the serpent had turned into a human. He asked if she could call her Ellie and told her to just call him Vasil. The girl said his name out loud and suddenly remembered. Vasilius Axiom is the head of the Mages Guild and a demon who made a contract with the first mage Anastasia. The character didn't appear in the book, but Echelot had mentioned him and said that he raised mages, and he also said that Vasilius was a pervert who remade the bodies of his students. Echelot entered the room and noticed that the girl was awake. She screamed his name and glowed with joy. Basilius said that was cruel to him. He wanted the girl to treat him the same way. Elizabeth ran away and hid behind Echelot's cloak. He asked the girl what the damn snake had done to her, if she had been persuaded to adjust her body. The girl said nothing of the sort had happened so far. Echelot looked at Basilius with disbelief. The serpent in human form told Echelot that if someone from the outside listened to him, he would definitely get it wrong. he said that Ellie's body had already been completely tweaked. Elizabeth was startled. She didn't understand what Basilius was talking about. Elizabeth, Echelot, and Basilius were sitting at the table talking. The girl realized that she had been adjusted parts of her body that were damaged. Basilius told her that her body was now free of cysts. There were whole teeth in place of broken ones, and the spell was gone. Elizabeth noticed that she was actually starting to speak more clearly. She learned that while she slept, she was moved around a bit, and so the girl woke up in a different place. Elizabeth was told that they were in a town on the border between Alpenia and Holland, and they would soon board an airship and travel to Aragold. Basilius told them that it was a city of mages, and told them that he was the president of the Association of Mages in that city and the godparent of Echelot. He said that he wouldn't even be surprised if he knew that Echelot hadn't introduced himself and told him what his godson's name was, and that he was a 12th grade battle mage. Basilius added that when they were in Aragalda, Elizabeth would have to stand trial, all because she was summoning low-level spirits. He reassured the girl and told her not to worry because she was a special child after all. The girl thanked him for the explanation and for fixing her body. Basilius was pleased with how polite the little girl was and asked if she liked her new body and offered to become his apprentice. To become an apprentice, all she had to do was sign his hand for the teacher-apprentice contract and held out her palm to Elizabeth. After Basilius's words, Echelot aimed a purple beam at him, which burned his face. The serpent said that it was cruel and he was just taking the opportunity to be a teacher for Elizabeth. Echelot ordered him to take his hands off the child and said that since the treatment was over, it was time to disappear, and his help was no longer needed here. Basilius replied that he was not an obedient child who would only leave because he was told to. Echelot replied that the spirit in front of him was just an ordinary spirit, and he saw no reason why he couldn't disappear now. Basilius thought it was wrong to say such a thing to someone who had raised him all these years, and said that he would not go anywhere, because if he did, he would not see Elizabeth for a week, which was too long. After hearing all of this, Elizabeth reached out to Echelot and said that she didn't mind if Vasil went with them, and it sounds like they are very close. The girl said that they were very easy to talk to, and besides, Echelot is Vasilius's godson, who smiled and said that he liked the girl more and more. Echelot carried the girl in his arms. She looked around and saw the cannons sticking out of the buildings. The girl said it looked more like a fortress than a city. Elizabeth wanted to address Echelot by name, but then she remembered what he had asked her and called him a wizard. She asked why the people who walked ahead of her carried swords. Echelot answered that it was because of a bunch of rotten bones. The girl realized that he was talking about the elders. The wizard told her that the armed men were either mercenaries or hunters of evil spirits, and that they made their living by handing over the corpses of evil spirits to necromancers from Holland. Elizabeth noticed Echelot's voice change drastically. She asked him if he hated evil spirit hunters. He replied that they were not even worthy of his hatred. Basilius, who was perched on his neck, added that Echelot just couldn't stand it. The mage asked the serpent to be quiet. In the Great Compact, which dictates the rules for mages, any action that provokes magical pollution is forbidden. However, these people don't care about the Great Treaty. They only think about lining their pockets by selling holy stones and corpses of evil spirits. Echelot said that if they killed a couple of spirits in a normal region, there would be no problem. But hunting in a polluted area was more dangerous. Where the border between Alpenia and Holland lies, there is a heavily polluted region called the Great Forest. Not only the Great Treaty, but also the government of many countries forbid climbing into the thicket of this forest. All because the level of magical pollution can increase dramatically because of it. Hunting, selling, and buying spirits caught there is also forbidden. But one country does allow hunting in this forest, the infamous Holland. The necromancers here practice magic where corpses are used as fuel. There are a lot of impatient people out there who want to get their hands on the corpse and evil spirits no matter what. The hunters have turned the forest into their base and make huge money selling their prey without much effort. It's like a dumpster full of swarming bugs. The mere existence of evil spirits pollute everything around by emitting negative energy, and the corpses of evil spirits emit even more substance. To get rid of the negative energy, polluted regions are usually cleaned up, or the corpses are simply burned. Mercenaries and evil spirit hunters do neither. The reason is simple. The first reason is it costs too much, and the second reason is it completely takes away their profit from selling the corpses. Elizabeth asked if that meant that Echelot had blown the head off one of the elders because of what they were doing to the great forest. Serpent moved to Elizabeth's face and said she guessed correctly. The girl assumed that they wanted to conquer more holy stones and corpses of evil spirits, so they broke their promise. The girl remembered that even the book said that Echelot only fought those who went against the Great Pact. Basilius praised the girl and said she was very clever. He asked if she wanted to know anything else. Elizabeth told Echelot that he had said that it would not be good if people knew that the defender of the Great Treaty was in Holland. But the girl was surprised that he wasn't even hiding his face, and asked if there were any enchantments on him now. Echelot said that's right, and he's used a stealth spell. It causes the part of the brain responsible for recognizing faces to malfunction so that the person can't identify a certain object. For a more natural disguise, he reduced the effect of the spell a bit. In other words, they were now blending into the crowd and not attracting attention. Elizabeth realized that she was right. Snake said the girl was a genius. Echelot said the girl was very good at taking in information and had a great memory. The girl suggested that they might be annoyed by everything she says. The mage replied that it's fine and curiosity is a good trait, especially if she wants to become a mage. Basilius said that the girl would definitely become a mage. Elizabeth wondered if she really wanted to be a mage. She realized that a mage is not what she wants to become, but what she should become. Echelot saw a shop with merchandise. He pointed his finger at a cube and offered to buy it. Serpent hissed and asked how he even saw another boring battle golem there. Elizabeth asked what it was. Echelot gave her the cube in her hands and told her that it was a cube golem, and this is what it looked like before activation. The girl thought it was warmer and heavier than it looked. Serpent was angry and called it useless junk, and suggested that instead of the golem, she should buy a better hairpin for Elizabeth. Echelot said that if the thing broke, Elizabeth might hurt herself. The salesman replied and said that nothing like that would happen because the barrette was made in a workshop and it was made of tempered glass. So even if it broke, it would not break into large shards that could hurt the girl. Echelot took the hairpin in his hands, showed it to Elizabeth, and asked if she wanted it. The girl looked at the hairpin, blushing. Echelot watched the girl's reaction carefully. He put the hairpin on Elizabeth's hair and said it looked nice. Serpent said it was very cute, and as expected, the hairpin suited the girl. Elizabeth clearly liked the barrette and thanked him for it. Elizabeth was lying in bed, and the magician was sitting beside her in a chair. A lamp was shining on the bedside table, and it was late night outside the window. Echelot suggested that the girl take off her hairpin before she went to bed, because it was uncomfortable, but she didn't want to. The magician told the girl to go to sleep, and not to forcibly take off the midnight hairpin. Elizabeth revealed that she had tried to fall asleep, but it still didn't work. Echelot was very worried, asking where it hurt and what was wrong. Elizabeth talked about her worries and how she was afraid it was just a beautiful dream. Echelot called the girl by name. It was the first time, and the girl rose from the bed in surprise. The savior told Elizabeth that summoning demons was considered a crime, but promised that she would not be punished unless it was on purpose. He told her not to worry about it, but the little girl continued to worry. Echelot suggested that perhaps the girl didn't want to become a mage. She shouted that she couldn't become something else and immediately covered her mouth with her hands, realizing that she had said too much. She replied that she was just worried that she wouldn't be able to do anything else even if she tried, and since she had been given a talent for magic, she wanted to become a wizard. Elizabeth from the book made two fatal mistakes. The first mistake was her attempt to escape from Echelot, and the second mistake was abandoning the path of a magician in favor of the noble family that adopted her. Unfortunately, these aristocrats turned out to be secret sectarians, and Elizabeth was once again influenced. The girl looked at Echelot and wondered if he didn't want her to become a mage. She recalled that Echelot had never once suggested that she become a wizard. The book said that he had only saved her because of her gift, but for some reason he hadn't tried to convince her to become a mage. Perhaps because she hadn't shown him her talent like Elizabeth in the book. That wasn't what Ashlot meant, and said that once she made the choice, there would be no turning back. He reached out his hand to the girl. She supposed that Ashlot thought she couldn't bear the burden of her own talent. The girl supposed that maybe he was right. After all she was doing was running away from the hardships she had to face. She stopped her train of thought and decided that she should put it all out of her mind because she was Elizabeth Lilly. The girl thought that she wasn't running away from becoming the main character and just wanted to take a slightly different road before she met Enoch, the main character. She liked the real Ashlot better than the book version of him. The girl said it was okay if there was no going back, and no matter what she did, as long as she had those eyes, she would still end up being a magician. The mage looked at the girl and said it was amazing, because neither he nor that scaly abomination had told the girl about the peculiarities of her eyes, but she already knew perfectly well what was what. Elizabeth realized that he had purposely not told her about her eyes, and she decided that she had just made a mistake in saying that. She thought that if he was disappointed in her because she lied, he would hate her, and because of that, they might go back to the relationship they had in the book. Ashlot stroked Elizabeth's head and said it was okay. He told her not to worry and to stop shaking. He said he didn't care what she was hiding. The girl assumed that Ashlot knew everything, and she asked if he read her mind using magic. The wizard replied that mental magic wasn't his thing, and the girl was just too inept to hide it. Ashlot said that she had trusted him immediately, even though it was the first time she had met him, and had relied on him as if it were something ordinary for her. Then he began to suspect that she had known in advance that he would come to save her. Elizabeth asked why he was so kind to her if he knew everything, why he cared for her even though he knew she was hiding something from him. Ashlot crossed his arms across his chest and said that having secrets wasn't a crime, and even if it was, her ability posed no threat to him. The wizard told the girl to sleep and said that he wasn't mad at her at all, and tomorrow they would board the ship and the girl needed to gather her strength. Elizabeth could see that he wasn't lying, because inside his swirling body was quiet and smooth. The girl asked if she could be sure not to tell her secret. Ashlot answered that she could not tell if she did not want to and told her to go to sleep. The girl looked at him and realized that he had guessed. She mentally apologized for lying. She did it because she had her reasons. Elizabeth said that she couldn't tell him everything right now, but she would tell him some things. Elizabeth wanted to make sure that he wouldn't regret meeting her. The girl thanked Ashlot for pretending like he didn't know anything and fell asleep. The next day, they found themselves in the port of Holland's flying ships. Serpent said it was time to board, and he promised they would have a wonderful time. It was the first time Elizabeth had ever seen air towers with flying ships. She looked at everything very carefully. A guy greeted them, saying that they were from the Aragal Mage Association. The guy said that it wasn't often that one could find such amazing stealth magic skills. He admitted that he recognized them, of course, but a newcomer wouldn't have had a chance. Ashlot asked if the flying ship was still anchored. The guy replied that loading on the ship was in full swing and told them to follow him. He would walk them to their quarters. The girl looked up into the sky and saw magic crystals. The guide on the ship had told her that they called them membranes, and they attracted objects of a certain size to them to prevent flying ships from colliding and to keep the air tower running smoothly. The girl pondered why not just land the ships on the ground. In that case, she didn't understand why the air tower was needed. The serpent crawled closer to the girl and said that wasn't the only purpose of the membranes. They also charged the magic crystals aboard the flying ships so they could fly in the air. Ashlot asked the serpent to stop talking. The guide turned, thinking it had been said to him. The serpent told the girl that he was only an illusion created through the magic of communication, and only she and Ashlot could see him. The girl realized that she might have been thought of as talking to herself. Ashlot told the guide to tell her about himself and said that he looked like a battle mage. He replied that they would be spending 3 days together on board. He didn't even introduce himself. The guy corrected himself and said his name was Michael, and he was a 5th-class battle mage and the best mage of the 2nd Magic Platoon of the Alpenia Empire. Ashlot asked what a 5th-class battle mage was doing on a cargo ship. Mikhail replied that they would be carrying experimental combat equipment, and he was on board as an escort. Echelot asked what the association told him about him. Mikhail said that he had been told that a 7th-class mage assistant was needed to assist in finding a ship to Aragold, and that the man would have no problem enduring the risky voyage. Michael was told that he could leave the escort mission to Echelot on the way to Aragold, and he clarified if that was indeed the case. The guide said that if that was not what they expected, he would do his best to find another ship. Echelot said that he understood, and the important thing was that they would be taken aboard the flying ship. There should be no problems. If anything goes wrong during the voyage, Michael's reward for escorting them will be doubled. Elizabeth reflected that Mikhail had called Asheloth a 7th-grade assistant mage and realized that he didn't know who Asheloth really was. Mikhail showed them which quarters they could occupy. Upon entering the room, the girl was very surprised, for there were not cabins but real rooms. The boy said goodbye and said he would come back later. The serpent reincarnated into a man and asked Echelot why he was so unsociable. He said that he would not be killed on the spot if he made friends with any of the other wizards. Elizabeth jumped up in surprise. She didn't realize when Vassal had time to reincarnate. Echelot said there was no use messing around with those who had no talent. He looked at Vasilius with disdain. The serpent in the guise of a man asked what the mage's expression was, and said that unlike him, he didn't avoid conversations simply because he was too lazy to talk. He added that the untalented kids better not see him, or they'll be blinded by his talents. Elizabeth approached Basilius and asked him not to be angry. She said that she knew he had a heart of gold. Basilius replied that Elizabeth was very kind and sweet, and asked her to never change and to become a wonderful sorceress soon. They hugged, and the girl promised that she would do everything for that. Elizabeth pondered that it was all strange, and 5th-grade mages were considered quite powerful. The book said they were among the elite of the country. She tried to remember if Michael's name was in the book. Basilius called Elizabeth to the window, and she saw that they had already departed. Still, she tried to remember Michael, and realized that if she didn't remember him, he didn't play an important role in the story, and it was easier to forget about it. On the first day of their journey on the flying ship, Mikhail introduced them to the crew. He introduced them to the captain. They had a delicious meal, and Echelot ate nothing. They had a good time and walked around the ship. Even as they slept peacefully, the flying ship continued on its journey. Michael suggested that Echelot and Elizabeth take a walk on deck, saying that even though there was a strong wind, the view was beautiful. Ashelot replied that it was too dangerous. The guide said he couldn't bear to look at sad children. Mikhail rustled his hand in his pocket and pulled out some candy. He apologized to the girl that they didn't have much to look at here and offered the treats. He said he bought them for his daughters, and if Elizabeth wanted some, she could treat herself too. Elizabeth noticed that Michael only looked to be in his early 20s. How could he have kids? The boy told her that he was older than he looked, and wizards always look younger than their years. He said that he was 40 years old, and had long since fathered 2 daughters and was about the same age as them. Echelot was very surprised when Elizabeth said she was 10 years old because she looked younger. She explained that she didn't eat much, but when she was 5, she and her friends looked the same. Mikhail laughed and told the girl not to worry, because his daughters were skinny at first too. But now they were the biggest and strongest in the village and would make wonderful generals. Hearing the word general, the girl remembered. Imperial Mage Michael. She realized she knew this story. The girl who served the Empire. Battle Mage General Yulpendis. Elizabeth recalled that her last name was only mentioned in passing in the book, but she definitely remembered this girl. She had volunteered at the front to avenge her father, who had been killed in Holland by an elder, and had sacrificed herself by going up against a sworn enemy. Mikhail was this girl's father. She was trying to figure out when Mikhail would die. Now the girl looked very sad. She realized that if they were now in Holland's territory, his death must happen today. The girl convinced herself that everything would be all right, because Echelot was with her. There was a rumble of thunder and panic. Echelot was holding Elizabeth in his arms. Michael assumed that the gravity control was off and said he needed to go see what was going on. He told the wizard to run to their room with the girl. The serpent called out to Echelot. and he responded by grabbing his neck. Basilius said he didn't know anything. The mage asked the serpent what Centaurus Balzac, one of the elders, was doing here. The serpent replied that he knew nothing and it was just a coincidence. Echelot reminded him that the scum he once blew his head off attacked the ship as soon as they entered neutral territory. Basilius replied that if the elder had known he would be on board, it would have been more than just a destroyed ship, and said to get off the ship. Serpent told Echelot that if he, the protector of the Great Treaty, got involved in a battle between Alpenia and Holland, it would turn into an international problem, and besides, the little girl didn't belong there at all. Echelot turned his head to Elizabeth, and she asked him what was going on. The girl realized that something dangerous was going on. He replied that she was in no danger, for he was close by. The girl wondered why the ship was suddenly attacked. She did not understand at all what was going on. Elizabeth pondered that if Michael was to die today, she should have guessed it earlier. But who even remembers the deaths of minor characters? They were at a point where the main story hadn't even started yet, and it was just part of the plot. Elizabeth thought that surely she could have made a difference, but a voice inside her said that where has it ever been seen that a main character would get maimed trying to save a minor character? After all, they are just destined to die. Elizabeth realized that the inner voice was telling her that this sacrifice was necessary for the development of the plot, and it could be turned a blind eye. The girl told the mage that she would be fine, and there was no need to run away from the battlefield because of her. She asked Acheloth to help them. The ship crackled, a demon flying behind it. Mikhail was terrified, so no matter what he did, the fog didn't dissipate. He told the navigator to pick up speed as fast as possible, and if they didn't get away from the demon, they were doomed. In response, he heard that the ship wasn't moving an inch. Mikhail realized that if it was a medium-level demon, it wouldn't even be able to get close to the ship. If the ship can't move either, then it's a top-tier demon. Mikhail assumed that they were hunting for experimental battle gear. He couldn't have imagined that they would encounter a top-tier demon. The crew was only holding on thanks to the protective magic, but soon it would weaken, and they would all die. Mikhail said that even though they might die, an Imperial warrior could not die without a fight, and before he died, he promised to burn this demon's eyes to the ground. The demon suddenly disappeared from sight. Michael thought for a second that they had broken away, and suddenly it flew right above him. The monster sensed resistance and high-level magic. It called out to Acheloth Vane. Michael, upon hearing Vane's name, realized that the Great Treaty Protector, Echelot Vane, was on the ship with him, and he hadn't even noticed him. He pondered, if it was really Echelot, then why would he help him? The Protector of the Great Treaty had no reason to get involved in this skirmish. The demon called out to Echelot and asked what he was doing on the flying ship. Was he working for the Empire? The monster told him to answer. Echelot covered the girl's eyes and told her not to look, and he answered the demon that his being here had nothing to do with the Empire, but that he just didn't like them. The demon replied that this was a lie, and they had never once violated the terms of the Great Treaty. Echelot said he hated to see a creature left without brains talking. He asked if that was an appropriate reason. The entire crew of the ship watched this powerful magic and shuddered. Mikhail went over to thank Echelot for his help. Elizabeth tried to brush off the hand that was used to cover her eyes so she couldn't see what was happening. Mikhail said that he never thought he would personally meet the 12th student of the Axiom School, and said that he was honored. Echelot told him that the head of their forces, Centaurus Balzac, would be arriving on the ship soon. Hearing this, the navigator of the ship clarified in a trembling voice that he was talking about Centaurus Balzac, one of the immortal rulers of Holland. He blamed Echelot for everything and said that because of him they would all die. The magical power struck the navigator and he fell, and Echelot said it was an automatic spell that triggered when he was threatened. He didn't think that even in that situation, there would be a goon to threaten him. Mikhail asked when Balzac's power would appear. The mage replied that Centauri would arrive in 5 minutes. Mikhail realized it would be shameless to ask, but he had no choice, and now was not the time for hubris, for he wanted to see his wife and his daughters. Bowing his head, Mikhail asked Acheloth to defeat Centaurus Balzac, and promised that the army of Alpenia, and he personally, would never forget such a gesture of kindness. He said that if Echelot would help him, in return, they would fulfill any request he could fulfill. The mage said that if the request could be any, then he was asking to watch over Elizabeth. The girl was indignant. Michael replied that he knew how to take care of children, much less girls. It was his confession in general because he himself had 2 daughters. Echelot said he would come back for the girl in a week, hoping there would be no problems. He told the girl that the man would be looking after her for a week. Elizabeth asked if he would really have to fight for a whole week. Echelot told her that fighting the dead was not the same as fighting the living, and they would not stop until you destroyed their life vessel. The little girl realized that if Echelot did not join the battle, Michael would surely die. Elizabeth looked at Echelot with an adult look and said that she agreed and she still had vassal. Serpent confirmed that he wasn't going anywhere, and Mikhail promised that he would protect the girl even at the cost of his life. Echelot said that if anything went wrong, he would not get away with his life alone and let the girl go. A monster that called itself the Great Centaurus Balzac appeared above the flying ship. He called out to Echelot. The whole crew of the ship trembled. Elizabeth was very scared too. Echelot had conjured a magical portal, using space folding where the ship could fly into. No one knew that space folding was possible on such a scale. The magician bid the girl farewell and told her to wait for him there. Elizabeth sat on her knees, cried, and asked him to come back safe and sound. The ship flew several hundred kilometers ahead. The navigator fell to the floor and breathed a sigh of relief, thinking they had broken away. There was a huge flock of bats hovering above the ship. Michael said they were spirits, and though they had jumped a couple hundred kilometers, the sky was filled with spirits even there, and the stubbornness of the elders was not enough. The navigator was in a panic and said he had had enough and it was time to run away from the ship. The little girl looked at everything that was happening and did not understand why there were evil spirits even here. After all, she thought they were safe if Echelot stayed there to defeat the elder. Michael ran up to Elizabeth and told her that she had to run. He told her to get on the lifeboat and get as far away from there as possible. He told Carmen to take this girl and put her on the lifeboat. Carmen carried out the order and took the girl in his arms, but she realized that she could not escape and had to stay because she had seen with her own eyes the name of each of the evil spirits that were chasing the ship. The voice inside the girl asked what was the point, because if she stayed here, there was nothing she could do to help, because she was small and defenseless. The voice went on to say that in order to save the crew, her father decided to stay on board and defend the ship to the last. The voice said that she and her father were very much alike. Elizabeth tried to figure out whose voice it was, which kept saying that there was no need to shed tears for him, that it was an honor to fight shoulder to shoulder with Elizabeth. The girl realized who was talking to her and screamed Kylie's name. Carmen looked at the girl. She explained that there was hardly any time left and asked her to trust her and take her back to the wheelhouse. The little girl said that it was the only way they could save Kylie's daddy. Elizabeth begged to trust her. Carmen asked how the little girl knew what the general's daughter's name was, but now was not the time to think about those little things, and he continued to carry the girl into the dinghy. Elizabeth yelled that they were still going the wrong way. She repeated that she could help. Carmen replied that he and the general were military and couldn't accept help from civilians. Elizabeth didn't understand how she had hoped that she would finally be useful somewhere at least. She blamed herself for what had happened, for if she had predicted the elders' attack a little earlier, things would have turned out differently. Behind Carmen's back, the girl saw Basilius, who asked if she could really help and asked her to nod if she could. Elizabeth nodded, showing that it was true. Basilius promised that he would do it all now. He touched Carmen's head and he froze. The girl ran her hand in front of his face and realized he was unresponsive. Basilius told her not to worry about Carmen and asked the girl to share her plan because everyone on board could die. Elizabeth wanted to reply, but the serpent interrupted her. He wondered aloud what he even cared, since humans were born by the hundreds of thousands every day. But a child endowed with such a unique talent for magic was a true rarity. Basilius said that Elizabeth was more valuable to him than all those ordinary wizards, and he would not let her get involved in something dangerous. The girl didn't understand why he said that. The serpent said that even if her scheme was madness, but there was at least one chance of success. It made all the difference. He told the girl to tell him how she proposes to handle it all. Elizabeth replied that they could use her eyes. Serpent said she only had 2 rings of power left, and even though her eye of truth hadn't gone anywhere, in her current state, she could read the names of at most 2 evil spirits, and said she didn't stand a chance against the contract. To use summoning magic, the summoner must overcome 3 steps. The first is called summoning. The summoner summons a spirit or demon into the human world. The second stage is adverb. The summoner must find the creature's true name or recognize it by giving the spirit or demon a new name. The third stage is retention. By making a contract, the summoner binds the spirit or demon to this world. Once the summoner is done with all 3 stages, the one summoned can use their powers in the new world. Vasily said he could see right through Elizabeth. He said that those evil spirits were already bound to their world. Because of the contract with Centaurus Balzac, they wouldn't even have to go through the 3 stages. The serpent realized that the girl wanted to find out their true names, and afterwards, use her power to intercept the contract and make her own. He explained that the plan would only work if a strong wizard was involved. The serpent repeated that the girl only had 2 rings of power left. Basilius asked if Elizabeth really thought she could intercept the contracts of all those spirits in that state. The girl shouted that she could. Basilius didn't think so, because just using the Eye of Truth alone would take a huge amount of power. The girl said she knew where to get more power. She told the serpent that there was a magical crystal on the bow of the ship, and it could be used for that purpose. Basilius hesitated for a moment. The serpent said it wouldn't work, and it was unclear what would happen to the ship when she used up all the power of the crystal. If the ship went down, they would all die anyway. Elizabeth shouted about the bats, and Basilius realized they could use their ability to fly. It was a wonderful idea. Vasilius told the girl that she was right. He used magic, and the girl plopped to the floor out of Carmen's arms. Serpent promised he would keep an eye on him. He said she would have to get to the navigator's room herself and asked if she could manage. Elizabeth was sure she could do it all, and the serpent let her go. Michael on the ship continued to battle the bats, of which there was no end. The glowing flying skull asked if the mage would admit defeat and said he would give him the chance to experience the flame of Toronto, and a painful death was guaranteed. Mikhail replied that if the bloody skull decided to cheat him, he'd better say he'd keep him alive. He realized that he had to hang on until Elizabeth was saved. He needed to kill as many monsters and evil spirits as possible. Mikhail noticed that the bats had stopped moving. Elizabeth ran up to him and hugged him and said she was glad he was alive. The mage asked in horror what the girl was doing here. The girl called out to Basilius and said it was his turn. The serpent reincarnated into human form, touched his finger to Michael's forehead, and showed him the whole story of how Echelot had found the girl. The mage realized that Elizabeth was a sorceress with the Eye of Truth. Mikhail shouted that it was just a legend about a sorceress with the Eye of Truth. Basilius suggested that the argument be put aside for a more appropriate time. He looked at the glowing skull and said that it would come around soon. Elizabeth promised that her idea would work, and Michael's instinct, which had kept him from death in countless battles, suggested that the girl was right. Michael, with the girl in his arms, ran towards the glowing skull and with his magic hammer struck it. Balzac flew further away from the ship. The bats started moving again, and Mikhail said he couldn't hold them off for longer than 10 minutes, and in that time, the girl had to have time to intercept the contract. She said she understood everything and called Vasilius. Vasilius said he would help the girl now, and crouched down beside her. He took the little girl's hands and warned her that as soon as he connected her to the crystal, the girl interrupted and said that she would start to lose her life force, and she knew it. Basilius said it wasn't that simple, and to make her absorb the power from the magic crystal faster, he would briefly change her physique. But with her life force level so weak, the girl will only have one chance. Elizabeth said she understood everything. Basilius praised the girl, saying he liked determined kids like her. The girl began to conjure and felt pain because too much power was being poured into her. She realized that now she would just let it out and it would get easier. Elizabeth raised her head and looked at the spirits, telling them to get away from the protective barrier. The spirits began to disperse, and the glowing skull realized that the little man was a threat and needed to attack. Michael continued to fight the spirits, and the girl was sure that this demon would definitely lose control of the spirits again, because the real Elizabeth Lilly had handled such a thing many times. At the moment of confronting a demon who is subject to control magic, the first thing to do is to give orders to his monster minions. That way, one could hurt his pride and grab the right to control in time. Skull said that the little man's actions were unforgivable. Elizabeth intercepted the demon's true name. He commanded that the girl be destroyed. Mikhail screamed that he could no longer contain the spirits. The little girl realized that a little more would have to wait. The demon ordered to destroy the magic crystal, and the spirits rushed to attack. The girl slipped and fell from the ship. Michael tried to catch her, but did not have time. The girl flew down and screamed that she needed any magical object with the largest crystal of power. She was thrown a knife that had a huge red crystal on the tip of the handle. That crystal was enough for Elizabeth, and she yelled out that the demon's name was Skulla. She called his name and told him to save her, for she was falling down. Skulla's eyes lit up, now commanded by little Elizabeth. The bats huddled together and swept the girl up like a pillow. The little girl was glad it had worked out. A glowing skull appeared behind the girl. He asked her name. Elizabeth didn't understand what he wanted from her. Skull asked the girl's full name, and she called herself Elizabeth Lilly. Skull recognized the girl as the new official contactor and said that the execution of the first command successfully completed the new directive. Skull said that weak language skills were recorded and he would now remedy the situation, said he was beginning to set up a new way of using language tokens. Elizabeth replied that she was fine and he was the one talking strangely. Skulla understood the first order and complied. Then he asked for his next instruction. Elizabeth understood that she had to get up first. She looked at the ship and realized that it would not hold in the air because she had taken all the power from the magic crystal, and at this rate the ship would just collapse, flying into splinters. The girl told Skull to make sure the ship did not fall. He answered her that the order was unreasonable and offered to take Elizabeth to safety. She replied that she had to save them. Skulla said that the approximate weight of the ship was 3 tons, and Skulla's 247 servants were incapable of holding that weight. Elizabeth realized she couldn't just leave it all behind like that. She grabbed the skull with her fingers and began to trudge it in different directions, but it kept repeating that the order was unenforceable. Elizabeth said that the order was doable and she would take on one half and he the other. The girl swung around and threw the skull toward the ship. Elizabeth believed they could do anything. She told the spirits to carry her to the ship. She called out to Michael. He turned around and saw the girl and was glad she was in one piece. Basilius was also glad that Elizabeth was okay. They hugged. The girl told him that she was able to rewrite the contract, but the main thing was that they needed to get back on board right away. Michael said that they would run to the lifeboat, but the girl explained that the magic crystal was empty, and without it, the lifeboat wouldn't take off either. Elizabeth said that she could make sure that the ship didn't go down, and first they needed to put the ship into emergency landing mode. That way, they could keep it flying all the way to Earth. Even though she had no power left and the magic crystal was empty, Elizabeth was sure that they would be able to do without power, because she had made a contract with the demon and everything would work out. First, they had to find someone on board who could steer the ship. Carmen shouted to Michael from the deck that everything was bad and that the girl had disappeared somewhere, but he saw her standing next to the general. The crew members wanted to run away from the ship, but Mikhail said they had to put the ship into emergency landing mode and told them to go back to the navigator's room. The guy didn't want to, because his fiancée was waiting for him at home, and Mikhail had to drag him by force. The ship continued to fall. Fire was blazing on it, and from below it was supported by flying evil spirits, which now obeyed Elizabeth. The girl told Skull to continue to keep the ship in the air, while Elizabeth herself wanted to make it fly. Skulla asked if Elizabeth was really human because her talent for control surpassed Skulla's own, and he did not understand, for such a thing was impossible for a normal human. The girl replied that it was possible for her because she was Elizabeth Lilly. The ship stopped and it was left to carefully land it on the ground. It was a great relief for the little girl, and she had only a little time to hold on. The girl was already exhausted, and Basilius told her that she could let go of the ship. She had already helped them a lot, and everyone would survive except those unlucky enough to fall off the ship. The serpent hugged the girl, and she said she would not let go of the ship. Vasil realized that all talented kids are so stubborn. He took Elizabeth's pain away from her, and she felt a little better. Vasilius asked how she managed to pull something like that off at such a young age. The girl herself didn't realize how she was able to do it, how she was able to make a contract with a demon. Intercepting a contract from others was forbidden by the Great Treaty. The girl asked the serpent to keep the fact that she had made a contract with Skulla a secret from Eshaloth. Elizabeth said he didn't want any unnecessary trouble either, and asked him to promise not to tell him. The powerless girl's eyes closed, and when she opened them, she saw lights, thinking it was Skulla and the bats. There was also a thread extending from her hand. The girl thought this was proof that she had made a contract with Skulla through her true name. Elizabeth herself didn't realize how she knew all of this. Elizabeth noticed that there was another thread that was being pulled. She realized that the contract with the previous owner had not yet been broken, and Skulla might not realize who the current owner was. The girl decided to cut off the stranger's thread. The red thread hit the girl, and Centaurus Balzac's voice said that she was the child that Echelot had saved. The girl thought he must have sensed someone affecting the contract, and because of that, Balzac was able to invade her mind. Balzac asked how she was able to intercept his contract. After all, she is just one of the mortals. He asked if she was a sorceress with the Eye of Truth. Elizabeth realized that he knew everything. Balzac now understood why Echelot had come to these lands. He said that if he could subdue the magician with the Eye of Truth, Echelot would no longer be able to stop him. Elizabeth could not allow Balzac to invade her mind. She thought about how dare the pathetic necromancer pry into her head, and became very angry. There was nothing strange about these thoughts, for she was Elizabeth Lilly, a brilliant enchantress and mistress of her own destiny. Balzac noticed that what he was seeing was not like the mind of a child, and he realized that Echelot was in his mind. The mage appeared and said that Centauri was in no position to avert his eyes from his opponent. Centauri asked how the mage had managed to get into his mind. Echelot told the elder to stop cracking his knuckles and said it would be over once he blew the place up. Elizabeth felt Echelot's power. She realized he was here with her. The girl felt that at this rate he would hit her consciousness with an explosion as well. The dark figure took Elizabeth by the arm and led her away. She said it was time for them to meet. The figure in the girl's creation also introduced herself to Elizabeth. The girl realized that it was the same voice that spoke to her all the time, and it sounded like her own voice. But whether it really belonged to her, she did not understand. Elizabeth didn't say all those words. They came from somewhere inside. The mysterious voice said it wasn't time yet, and she didn't need to know yet, and asked her to temper her curiosity. The voice warned her that there was nothing to worry about, and said she had one more chance. Elizabeth didn't understand why her body was suddenly so big. After all, she was only 10 years old. But no, she was over 100 years old. And why did she suddenly think she was a child? The girl was aboard a Continental Union warship. This is Elizabeth Lilly, a genius sorceress, the Lord of the Seven Demons, the heroine who defeated the dragon, the ruler of the Empire of Alpenia, and the head of the Continental Union of Welfera. Despite all these high-profile titles, she was afraid to fight her. Elizabeth was summoned by her summoner, Dawn Rider Lucifer. He asked if they had changed their minds. She replied that she had not, and it was too late to retreat. Elizabeth looked up at the storm tower and thought that it was the last stronghold of humanity, the castle of the first mage Anastasia. Once upon a time, she too wanted to be on top of it. The girl asked Lucifer to destroy the barrier. Lucifer carried out the order. He gave Elizabeth his hand and called her a brilliant sorceress. Elizabeth told Enoch to be on guard, and he asked if they would really go there. The girl said she could go alone, and Enoch replied that if she dared to do so, it was his duty to willingly follow her. Elizabeth and Enoch fought against the golems. The girl said that she wished they were not summoned spirits, because she would have easily intercepted the contract. Elizabeth called out to Azazel, and he told them to advance, and said he would catch up with them soon. the girl realized that they could still make it. There wasn't much left. The brilliant enchantress advanced and destroyed the walls in front of her. She saw Eshaloth standing next to the corpse, who told her she was too late. The first mage in history, the sorceress with the Eye of Truth, Anastasia Axiom. She led the human race to victory in the Great War against demons and evil spirits 300 years ago. Anastasia set up a protective barrier atop the storm tower to keep the world safe from the invasion of evil spirits whose power surpassed that of the supreme demons. Eshaloth said that not everyone liked Anastasia. Elizabeth recalled that he'd promised her that he'd give her another chance and said he'd wait. Eshaloth replied that he couldn't wait any longer. The demons and evil spirits, who had a thirst for destruction built into them by the very nature of the universe, never stopped looking for ways to get their way. And one day, they found the right method. Eshaloth said that destroying the defense barrier was their dream. Elizabeth replied that she wasn't talking to him and asked how long he was going to hide behind the dragon. Unlike other demons, the dragon is a special entity that can absorb weaker fowls through touch. As time passed, the dragon absorbed more and more essences and became disproportionately stronger until Elizabeth managed to seal it after a fierce battle. However, one of the supreme demons contracted by Anastasia unsealed the dragon. Eshaloth replied that the entities that were absorbed by the dragon become one with it. He asked if she thought the person they were trapped inside would be able to retain their consciousness forever. It was time to forget their fruitless dreams, and better to obediently watch as they got closer and closer to the fulfillment of their wish. Elizabeth asked how long he planned to touch her with his blood-stained hands. Eshaloth said that Elizabeth was very naive if she still hoped he was alive. He understood that love was a strange human emotion prone to foolishness, but this was too much. There was a noise in Eshaloth's head. He held his hands to his head and thought that this was all impossible, and that the pathetic half-breed was not capable of this. Elizabeth looked at him and couldn't believe that it was really Eshaloth. The dragon, freed from captivity, immediately swallowed the crystal of the supreme demon and turned this world into hell. Elizabeth asked Eshaloth why he didn't wait and lied about giving her one last chance, because he said he could last another 100 years. Anastasia decided to go to the extreme then, and she trapped the dragon inside the body of her apprentice, Eshaloth, so that there would be time to close the protective barrier and then send all entities of the supreme demon level to the underworld. However, for the sake of successfully changing the barrier, she had to sacrifice herself. Even if Eshaloth died after her mentor, Elizabeth, a sorceress with the Eye of Truth, would be able to become the guardian of the protective barrier and keep humanity safe. All the mages agreed with Anastasia's decision, except Elizabeth. The girl asked Eshaloth why he had been chosen for this role, and why it was he who would be banished from their world. Eshaloth answered that it would not happen to him, and that as soon as he crossed the border of the underworld, his consciousness would be erased and he would die. Elizabeth grabbed Eshaloth by his cloak and asked him if he was really okay with this, if he was content with a life in which he was used until death, just because he was half demon. Eshaloth touched his hand to Elizabeth's face and told her that the process of erasing his consciousness had accelerated and he would last another year at most, so he decided to end it while he was still with himself. And the mentor agreed that it was for the best. Even though they still had a whole year to go, Eshaloth's consciousness was almost wiped out while he fought an internal battle with the dragon to get there, and then also to improve the defense barrier. Elizabeth said she was being too naive, thinking she could save everyone. Elizabeth doesn't want to save everyone, and it's enough for her to save him. But it was silly to hope that Eshaloth would listen to her. He asked the girl what she was up to, worried so he wouldn't have to banish her from this world. Eshaloth reminded the girl that she was one of the guardians of this world, and told her that this was not allowed. Elizabeth replied that she hadn't asked for that, didn't ask to be made a guardian of her. Never once did she say she wanted to be Axiom's successor, nor did the thought ever occur to her. Elizabeth wanted only one thing: to become stronger and escape her tormentors. She wanted to be free. Even though she gained immense power, her wish was never fulfilled. The fault was the sins she had taken on her soul to get this far, and that's why she kept her resentment to herself until now. Elizabeth wanted to repay her sins in full, to gain her freedom, so that she could then mend a relationship that hadn't gone well from the start, and the result was something else entirely. She screamed at Ashalot that she would save him. Ashalot said that there was no point in turning back time just for that, because history would repeat itself again. Elizabeth asked what would happen if she remembered everything. In response, the girl heard that she wouldn't be able to keep her memories when time was rolled back. The girl replied that was already her concern. Enoch greeted Eshalot and said that it had been a long time since they had seen each other, and they had just now finished dealing with the mob of golems. He, too, was part of the madness because he couldn't say no to Elizabeth. He asked if Elizabeth remembered about his memory transfer abilities. Memory transfer. It is the rarest gift possessed by members of the imperial family. A person could only use it once in a lifetime. Emperors used it to pass on the knowledge of government to their successors. Eshalot said that if Enoch spent this power now, he would not be able to pass on his own wisdom to his heirs. Enoch replied that he believed that the heir should become a worthy ruler with his own powers. And when Elizabeth began to rewrite history, the past and the future would intersect for a moment. He would catch that moment and pass on the memories, and his memory would pass on to Elizabeth from the past. Ashalot said he would only have about a second to pull something like that off, and it wasn't a given that he would be able to transfer all of his memories to Elizabeth in that time. Enoch said he had a hand in making sure that none of the memories got lost. He compressed them into plain text so that only the most important things got to Elizabeth. Enoch's memory was now like a normal book, and he had already shown this book to Elizabeth. It was called Welfer's Story. Eshalot called Enoch a scoundrel and said he had gone completely insane.